Welcome, everyone. This is Amanda Ray, President of Wild Ones Greater Baltimore, and I'm here with Ann Neo, Vice President of Wild Ones Greater Baltimore, and Anna Lee, Garden Designer of Perfectly Imperfect Gardens. I'm really excited about this talk tonight. I know everyone is just itching to get out in their garden, and she's going to inspire us with what she's doing right now and recently done. She's had her Perfectly Imperfect Gardens business started around the COVID times, but she's been a lifelong gardener, and she is always sharing wonderful information, and I'm super excited for everybody to hear what she has to say. We're going to talk about wild ones just a little bit. We promote the use of native plants with local and national education programs. So if you don't see anything locally that we're doing here, there's probably a national webinar that would be of interest to you. We have 94 chapters and 36 seedlings in 36 states. And I think our group is now over 100 members. So if you're not an official member, I would encourage you to go to the wildones.org website and find a chapter near you, whether it's ours or one of the other chapters in Maryland. We have Nation's Capital Region. We also have Chesapeake Bay, Frederick, and Marvin now. And we have a wonderful vision to have native plants and natural landscapes thriving in every community. And we advocate for native landscapes through education and community action. And our core values are respect for each other, for nature, and for the earth. We're an inclusive community and we welcome everyone. We share the latest evidence-informed strategies, and we grow through learning, action, and sharing of knowledge. So I'm going to now turn over this screen to Anna, and I'm sorry, Anna, and she can take it from here.
Here we go. So I started my Facebook page, Perfectly Imperfect Gardens, in addition to my business, just so that I could help my clients and my neighbors and my family members and friends have more access to information about native planting. There's so much information out there, and it's hard to kind of digest it all if you get it all at one time. So this is my way of making it more easy to digest in little tidbits. This presentation is kind of an amalgamation of all the things that I've talked about over the past few months, or actually since I started the Facebook group. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Some of this stuff is really basic. Some of it is a little bit more advanced. I hope everybody gets something out of the presentation. Okay, so this is what I start off with all my clients. Why are you gardening? Why are you planting? We always want to garden with a purpose. Some people do it because they want to relax. Some people want a space they can enjoy. I know for myself personally, it is a lot of things. It's my relaxation space, it's my exercise space, but also it's a way that I can give back to the environment and support wildlife around me, increase biodiversity. And so that's why I garden. It's good to go into gardening with a plan. Your plan does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be super fancy. All you need is a piece of paper and a pencil. Now, in this particular slide, I'm showing some stencils that I have. If you want to get fancy with it, you can grab some stencils. But whenever you're going to start a new garden bed, it's really important that you don't go to the nursery first. You come up with a list of, the things that you might want to put in there. You put some thoughts on paper. And then you start going forward, because otherwise you end up with plants in pots in the side of the house, which I myself am guilty of, that haven't gone into the ground. Or you have a plant and you're like, I don't know where else I can put this into, and then you put it in a space that doesn't necessarily work out. So planning your gardens in advance, planning new beds especially in advance, is really useful to your pocketbook, in addition to getting the design looking right. Okay. This is, so on that previous page, there's just my supplies. This is just a hypothetical little square. I plopped some shapes in there, and I put some sizes in there based on the spacing. And then I thought about some plants that I can put in there. Now I have to tell you, a lot of these images come from things that I've done in the past. So there's some things in here that are not native to our range. I apologize for that. I'll point all of those things out. In the back in this one, there's Fothergilla, and obviously that doesn't start as range. I think it starts in North Carolina or possibly Virginia. So that one's not native to us. But again, I do these renders for my clients. You don't have to do this. You can do little doodles on the paper, and then you can use Pinterest or just a file folder with images that you like of plants that really speak to you, and you can start making yourself an inspiration board. So for example, this is something that I did for a friend. I just doodled it in MS Paint. And then I had a little inspiration board with some of the plants that I wanted to use that correspond to the squiggles. So basically you just need pencil, paper, some squiggles, and then you start putting an idea together of what plants you want to use. And again, here's another one, really, really simple. I just, some graphing paper that I stole from one of my kids, I think. And then I put together some plants that I thought I would want in this pollinator garden. Another little asterisk, I will occasionally have herbs, ornamental herbs, Mediterranean herbs and things in there. Most of us have kitchen gardens. I like to mix my kitchen garden in with my native gardening, specifically because a lot of our herbs deter deer. And also it's kind of space saving for me. So I just have everything in together. So if you see stuff in there like that, that's why. And in here, this is the salvia that's not native. Everything else is native to us. Okay, so where do you get inspiration from? Again, you can look at gardening magazines. You can go for a walk in your neighborhood and look at gardens that you like. You can visit gardens nearby us. We have so many wonderful gardens near us. I actually just realized the Mount Cuba Center is also close to us. I didn't know that. Somebody told me that recently up in Pennsylvania. But for example, this was just an image I think I found in Fine Gardening magazine. It's inspiring to me. I really like the purples and the yellows. We can almost always find native plants that can take the place of non-native. So in this image, we got the yellow wild indigo, the golden ragwort. The Nepeta is not native, obviously, but you could use skullcap instead of that. We got little bluestem to add some texture in there and some blue color. Color doesn't have to come from flowers. I know a lot of people think that you have to have flowers for color, but you can use grasses for color, shrubs for color. I will occasionally also mention nativars in here, and I will point them out. The reason I end up having to use nativars in my line of work is because I'm restricted by HOAs, and a lot of times I don't get to go fully native 100% unadulterated all the time. So if I do mention a nativar, I will point it out as well. So this little garden was a little traditional English garden that I substituted our natives for. And so you can go with a Southwest theme, you could go with an Italian garden. The opportunities are endless. Just get inspiration from somewhere. Okay. If you don't have special software or anything like that, again, you can cut out magazine clippings. You can make a Pinterest board. That's really useful. You can use just some pictures that you throw into MS Paint and put them next to each other. It really helps to see the textures next to the colors, to see if those colors work for you and you like it. And there's some colors and textures that designers really like to use. It's honestly really up to you what you like. If you want a whole rainbow of colors, or if you want it, pastel-y, or if you want it really bright, it's totally what's up to you. As long as you like it and it works, that's fine. Okay, once you get your colors and your textures in, that really helps you narrow down your shopping list when you go to the nursery. Again, cost is always an issue when we're designing. So we don't want to just go and pick out one of everything that we like in the nursery. Hurts the pocketbook, and it doesn't always necessarily look right in the garden itself. Okay. So some of the design elements that I think about with clients and when I design is what is the size of the area that we're working on, and that determines your plant sizes. What is the purpose of this garden? What needs do we need to fulfill? Is it just for providing space for our pollinators and for our wildlife? Or are you getting use out of it? Do we need a seating space? Do we need a kitchen? Do we need a lawn for kids to play soccer on? I like to focus on layers and groupings of plants. Colors and textures are very important. We would like to ideally have 4 seasons of interest if we can, if we have space for it. We need to think about soil, water, mulch, which is super duper basic, but really, really important to get the basics right off the bat. Garden aspect is which direction is your garden facing? Is it south facing and really hot and dry? Is it north facing and shady? Does it get morning sun, afternoon sun? That's super duper important when you pick out plants. A lot of times when plants fail, it's because we're not giving them the basic things that they need in terms of enough light, the right type of soil, water, and some sort of mulching material at the very beginning. And then, of course, finishing touches. If you look at this picture that I have here in this slide, you would think, oh, I don't know what that means by finishing touches. That just the pots that are over there on the side, the gravel, the type of edging that you use, any kind of decorations that you use, seating space, those are all the finishing touches that just give a little bit of extra oomph to our gardens. And they make them fun. They don't have to be expensive things that you buy. I've seen people repurpose things that others have put on the side of the street, things that they've gotten from local sharing groups. Lots of recycled, reusable items. I've seen one lady use a dress form, an old dress form, as a trellis. So you can get pretty creative with your designing. Okay, so at the very beginning, your garden aspect. Are we planting in the sun or are we planting in the shade? And the plants that you pick are going to fit into one or the other of those groups. We have a few plants that kind of go both the full range. For example, black chokeberry will go full sun to full shade, and it will do dry all the way to a wet rain garden. But for most of our other plants, you really want to make sure that you're giving them the sun that they like, whether it's dappled, whether it's full shade, whether it's full sun. A lot of our beautiful flowers are from prairies and meadows, so they're going to be wanting
I
full
think
to
we might have a
mostly
little
sun. I'm sorry, was there a
difficulty
question?
with her.
My connection or someone else's? Okay, all right. Okay, so I always tell people, people will ask me, well, I really want this plant here, I really want this tree here, and it's less about what we want and more about what the site wants. So if you have a shade garden, a shady north-facing front of your house, you're not going to be able to put sunlovers there and have them thrive. It's just the reality of the plants. So we plant for the garden conditions that we have, not the ones that we want. Okay. The other thing that we need to be really worried about is sizing. You will see this in almost every neighborhood, every house, even my own house. There's still some shrubs that are too big for their spots that need to be removed, planted by the previous residents. So we really need to pay close attention to the final size, the mature size of the plants when we buy them. Most of the time that information will be on the tag from the nursery, but it's not always 100% accurate. Please, please, please take your phones into the nursery with you. And before you pick out a plant, if you're not super familiar with it, look up the size range that it's going to be and make sure that you give it enough space. For plants that are going up next to a house, ideally you want a minimum of 2 or 2.5 feet away from the house itself, away from your foundation. There's multiple reasons for that. You want to be able to get around your house. I don't know if you need gutter cleaning, if you need electrical work done, you need to be able to get around. Also, very close to the foundation, it's very dry. Most of our foundations here are concrete and they absorb a lot of moisture. They pull moisture away from your plant. The other thing is when it rains, there's a bit of a rain shelter that gets created between fences, walls, buildings. and the ground. So it takes a really heavy rain to saturate those 2 feet that are right next to your house. So please plant things away from your house if you can, if you have space. And that's extra important for less important for the perennials, but more important for trees and shrubs that need a little bit of extra water when they first get started. The next important thing that we need to focus on is soil. I hear all the time, well, I planted a native. It's supposed to grow here in this area of Maryland and it failed. And the reason for that is we don't have the same soil all over Maryland, number one. But also if you are in a development, most of that soil has been turned over completely when the development was being built. So the soil, especially near your house, is going to be not native to our area. So when you dig, and it's going to be different for all the areas around your house, every time you dig, you're going to come up with something slightly different. Look at the soil that you have. Is it really, really heavy clay? Is it lovely loamy soil? Is it sandy? Are you running into chunks of debris like bricks and concrete and stuff from the build? Sometimes we do have to amend our soil. And I don't say amend heavily with, compost and peat and all that stuff. Just find a local source that sells good quality topsoil in your local area. And you can use a little handful of that in your planting holes if you need to, if your soil is really struggling, if it's, super clay, it's holding on to a lot of water. Clay is actually full of water and nutrition, but it's all in such small particles that the plants can't, not all plants, most plants can't get that nutrition and water out. So it needs to be broken down mechanically by adding a little bit of amendment to it. Okay, what else do I have here? The other thing that you can do is a lot of our prairie plants, especially our grasses, help to break up soil and improve soil quality. I'll talk a little bit more about this later. But grasses like little bluestem and switchgrass will actually not only penetrate the soil and mechanically break it up, but encourage mycorrhizal fungi to grow and establish in the soil from what little mycorrhizal fungi might be in your environment. And it really helps having grasses there in order to get your other plants to thrive. And I use grasses in almost all of my designs if I can. I just throw a few in there. Okay. We talked about, are you on native soil? And this is just an image showing how they strip the soil, topsoil. They will, whenever they start a new job site, they will take all of your lovely topsoil and they'll sell it. And then they turn all that soil around and you're no longer on native soil. Next super important thing, we need to water our new plants. We have to water them. I encourage everyone to water them once a day, deeply at the roots, for at least a week, if not 2 weeks, until they're established. If you are planting in the springtime and we are lucky to get rain, you can water less. But even our native plants need good water to get established, and a light layer of mulching is good when you're just getting started. Once you've got a garden bed that's really full and you might just be adding a few other plants to it, you don't necessarily need to start, mulch everything in. But at the very beginning, if you have a bare ground, brand new bed that you've created, it needs some sort of mulching material. And you can use any kind of mulching material that you like. I like triple shredded hardwood mulch. I had pine trees that dropped a bunch of needles, so I used all my pine tree needles instead of bagging them up in the back of my yard to mulch for this winter on a new bed that I had. You can use rice hulls, you can use leaves, anything that you have readily available to you that is inexpensive. I discourage using gravel as a mulching material. Obviously, no plastic type mulch, rubber materials. That's not good for you or the environment. And if you are using mulch, wood mulch, please do not use dyed mulches because they leach chemicals into our soil and they end up in our waterways. For brand new beds, I'm using 3 to 4 inches of triple shredded hardwood mulch, which ends up degrading by the end of the season, by the way. For ornamentals, trees, and shrubs. For our prairie plants that are going in the sun, I'm only using 1 to 2 inches, so you don't need a whole lot of mulching material. And now the fun part, design. Sorry about the boring stuff. Okay, so when we are designing, we really, really want to create these lovely scapes that we see in magazines and on TV. I will mention to you at the start that a lot of these gorgeous designs that you see are done on large scale with thousands of plants. And it's really hard to recreate this at home unless you have a lot of space. So if you are not on acreage, don't be sad that you can't achieve necessarily this kind of a look, because this bed is probably 100 by 100 just on that right hand side of it, on the right side of that walkway. So that allows for a lot of layers and a lot of different heights and textures of plants. But we do the best that we can with the spaces that we have. So we want to choose plants that are appropriate in relation to our house. So here in this particular picture, there are plants that are over 8 feet tall, all the way in the back, coming down to probably 3 feet tall towards the front middle, and then 2 feet tall at the very front. And those are stepped down in increments over many, many feet. So if you have a bed that's 3 feet wide, 3 feet deep, you can only get about 1 or 2 rows of very small 1 to 2 foot tall and wide plants in there. If you have 5 feet, you can probably fit in a row of 3 foot tall and wide, 3 foot tall and wide plants, and then another row in front of 1 to 2 foot tall. If you have 10 feet deep, then you can add a third layer, but you have to think about stepping those sizes down. A lot of times I'll go in and clients will have grasses that are 8 feet tall, 6 feet tall, and then in the front they'll have coreopsis, which is 1.5 feet tall, and then there's nothing that softens that height change in the middle. So you definitely want to make sure that you're able to step down, so your plant choices are not necessarily what you want to plant, and more what the site is requiring of you. Okay. And of course, to make this more difficult, as you're choosing your plants for the layering, you also want to make sure that you have something blooming or interesting throughout all 4 seasons. And this goes along with the layering, drifts, groups, and repeating. So drifts and groupings are kind of the same thing. You can plant the same species of plant in groupings. So for example, the Rudbeckia that's here, you see that it's repeated. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 drifts of it. If you're doing this at home, could maybe do a grouping of 2 and then a grouping of 3 and another grouping of 3 on the other side of the bed. So you're repeating these groupings, and you have the same plant in different areas of the garden, and it actually causes it to be more cohesive. It causes the eye to have to see some balance in multiple areas of your garden, of that garden bed, and it just is more appealing to your eyes. A lot of times I will see clients who are struggling have one of each plant. So they'll have like a rose bush, and then they'll have a Rudbeckia next to that, and a liatris next to that, and like one little grass, and they like something else, so they put that there too. And none of it is really standing out. And it's because onesie twosies kind of get lost in a big bed of plants. So you do want to make sure that you're repeating the same plant multiple times in the same bed if you have space for it. That way nothing gets lost. Now, if you want a focal point, so maybe you want to bring attention to the center of a garden bed, you could put a structure there. Maybe you want to put a bird bath there, or you want to put a really lovely shrub there. That's okay. That creates something for the eye to be drawn to. But having just a single liatris in the middle of a bed, it's going to get lost. Okay, and next we go to textures. Textures are so important in gardening. I had a friend come over one time. We were in my backyard, and she said, nothing is in bloom right now, but your yard looks really nice. Why? And so I explained to her, I said, you know, we have leaves here of all different textures. We have narrow, thin leaves, strappy leaves, like from grasses or from irises. We have fat leaves from rudbeckia. We have skinny leaves. You know, all the different types of leaf shapes and colors, because they all come in, you know, slightly different shades of green. For example, blue false indigo has kind of like a bluey green leaf, and it kind of looks like, oh gosh, what is that other plant? It's escaping me, but it looks like another plant. And it's very interesting shape. It's kind of got like these heart-shaped little leaves next to each other, and water collects on them, and they're just really beautiful. So just that plant by itself, even out of flower, is gorgeous for another 2.5 seasons just to look at. Bark is also really important. For example, cherry trees, chokeberries, they have grayish, almost silvery bark. It's really beautiful to look at in the winter. They also have a really architectural shape in the winter. So even when all the leaves are gone, there's something there for you to look at. And a lot of our native shrubs also have berries on them that will persist into the winter. So not only are they benefiting wildlife, they're also really just gorgeous to look at. The stems that you see here that are red, that is from showy goldenrod, but also the stems on aromatic goldenrod have that red on them. So even flower stems can bring color and texture to the garden. Okay, so these are some of my favorite plants to design with. I try to use them in almost all of my garden designs if I can. Some of the reasons are how fast they grow, how well they perform, how easy they are to obtain from nurseries. There's some really, really gorgeous plants that are still not available widely in nurseries, so that makes things difficult sometimes. But here we go with some of my favorites. One of my absolute favorites, and I don't know why this shrub is not used more often, is black chokeberry. It has high wildlife value. It is doing something every single season. It's easy to fit it in. This picture is actually a grouping of 2 or 3 of them, but a single one is only about 1 to 2 foot wide at the base, and it grows 4 to 6 feet tall. And you can stick it into even small garden beds. Now, I will say chokeberry does tend to sucker just a little bit. You can let it sucker, or you can just, you know, prune it at the base. But it's definitely a plant that's worth having. And in the springtime, it has the most lovely aroma that comes from the blossoms on it, just walking by it. And it's not overpowering. It's just super delicate and light. And everybody comments on it, and nobody ever knows what it's from. It's from this particular shrub. Chokeberries tolerate upland and lowland conditions, so they can handle dry, they can handle wet, they can handle sun, they can handle shade. And our pollinators love them, birds love their berries, and the berries are actually edible by people, although I think you have to process them because they're very tart. And as you can see, they're a host plant for multiple species of butterflies and moths. And the other thing is that shrubs that grow in this kind of shape, if you use a grouping of them, it also provides shelter for wildlife, for birds and small mammals. The other really awesome thing about chokeberry is that they're black walnut tolerant, so they will grow under a black walnut tree. I have had deer browse this shrub. They tend to browse it more when it is young, and not when you buy it in the larger sizes or when it's had time to grow a little bit. But deer are a problem all over Maryland, so we just have to come up with fun solutions to keep them away. And its cousin, red chokeberry, they are slightly larger in terms of size, and slightly wider than black chokeberries, but they're still absolutely lovely. Chokeberries are really good at erosion control too. So if you have a site on a hill where soil is washing away, it is really a great plant to put there. They're also excellent to use in rain gardens because they will soak up and slow down water. And you can use them as a hedge. You can prune them to shape. I can't say enough good things about chokeberries, so they're one of my favorites. I'm obsessed with them. Okay, here's another shrub that is underutilized, New Jersey tea. They tolerate, again, moist soils all the way to dry soils. They do need good drainage, but they can handle periods of deluge. Pinkish white flowers in the summer. They smell wonderful. Hummingbirds, butterflies, all kinds of pollinators come to them. They are a host plant for various butterflies and moths, and they have gorgeous fall foliage. And they are considered deer resistant. Please take that with an asterisk next to it. Nothing is truly deer proof. They will at least try and nibble stuff and then spit it back out. So they are there to cause us some headache. Yet another plant, which I don't know why we do not have more common witch hazel planted. It's kind of like forsythia, but it's native to us and it's beautiful, and it's medicinal as well. They do like, it says full sun to dappled shade, but they prefer partly sunny, dappled shady spots. They are understory shrubs / small trees. They are not drought tolerant. So if you do have a spot near a creek or an area in your yard that tends to have more water pooling towards it, that's a great spot to plant one of these. They're great focal points. They bloom at an unusual time. I believe they bloom at the end of fall and into the beginning of winter. And their seeds are eaten by, again, a wide variety of wildlife. They are multi-stemmed, and I really love multi-stemmed shrubs in the landscape because they are just so picturesque, even without their leaves. So they create a lot of winter interest and early spring interest before we get foliage. Another super underutilized shrub, common ninebark. Ninebark, the deer will eat it. However, you can get a ninebark that's like in a gallon pot and it will grow nearly to full size within a year. So if you can protect it for about a year, you'll have a really gorgeous, usually around 8 foot tall and wide shrub. It has got a sprawling habit. It blooms profusely. It is loved by so many pollinators, and you can use these guys as a hedge. And if you plant them closely together and create a hedge, after about a year, the deer can't get past it. So if you can't put a fence up, you can create a thick hedge with common ninebark. And actually, I'll be doing this with University of Maryland, Baltimore County, is testing a ninebark hedge against deer. So we'll see how that goes. I'll get back to you guys on that. But I really like it for its super fast growth rate. Yet another plant that is not used often, northern bayberry. If you are looking to create a garden that is reminiscent of Italian gardens, this one kind of looks like an olive tree, and it's just got a gorgeous shape to it. The leaves are an interesting shape and color. They have little berries on them that are silvery gray. They like full sun, but they do adapt to various types of soil and weather conditions. Tolerant of wet sites, excuse me, sorry. They are a nitrogen fixing plant. People can use them as a hedge, as you can see in this picture. You can plant them more densely together, or you can plant a single specimen and prune it to shape. So you prune off the lower branches and kind of clean up the inside, and it can be a very lovely focal point. And this plant is deer resistant. This one, I'm sure you've seen a lot, red twig dogwood. Red twig dogwood just looks gorgeous in the winter time. Deer will nibble on it, but it grows back so fast that it's kind of not a big deal. Usually it can grow 6 to 9 feet tall and wide, but usually people, in order to get it to keep putting out those red branches, it gets pruned often. So you'll usually see it in like the 4 to 6 foot range. I have never seen it with berries. That is a picture of it with its berries, and that's because you have to let it get close to full size and have multiple ones on site. But it does have berries if you let it get to that point. Again, host plant for multiple species of butterflies. Great color year round. And their shrub, Virginia sweetspire. Yeah, it's in our range. Just making sure I'm making sure that I don't have any slides in here for plants that are out of our range and I'm not mentioning them. Um, Again, it's just a great landscape shrub, really good for pollinators, very interesting flowers that kind of droop off of it and weep, and attractive to hummingbirds and native bees. And I know we all love our hummingbirds visiting the yard, so this is a good one for them. One of my absolute favorite shrubs is winterberry holly. It's a deciduous holly, but I'm sure all of you have seen these on the sides of the highway and in roundabouts and in other people's gardens. If not, if you have them in your own garden, you can prune these guys to shape so they can act as a focal point. You can plant a big cluster of them and make a really big dramatic statement in the winter time. You'll have tons of birds in your yard in the winter that are traveling through, small mammals, and definitely 4 full seasons of interest with this one. I will mention that you will need, depending on which variety you get, you will need the corresponding male plant for the females in order to get berries. Okay, native grasses. I cannot design a garden without grasses. I think all gardens need native grasses in them, not just for wildlife, but also for aesthetics. I'm just going to kind of go off of this slide. So in North America, we have 4 main grasses that we call the big four. And those are little bluestem, big bluestem, Indian grass, and switchgrass. And there's another slide coming up which talks more about the root systems. But for me, grasses provide the matrix by which I plant the rest of my garden. So even if I'm not using any shrubs, the first things that will go in that I plan on putting in are the grasses. And I use those almost like foundation shrubs. So like where somebody would put, boxwoods, I will use grasses instead because they provide structure throughout the entire year. A few of our grasses have very upright or arching habits that remain that way even after snow. So, you get 4 full seasons out of them. My favorite one is little bluestem because of all the color that it provides throughout the year. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. We have lost a lot of our prairies throughout the US. Most people, when they think about restoring habitats, they're thinking about, oh, we need to plant more trees. We do. We definitely need to plant more trees in certain areas, but we also need to restore our prairies and those habitats. Grasses provide so much shelter for ground nesting birds, for our mammals, for so many different kinds of insects. One of the biggest things that I noticed after I discovered and started planting little bluestem in my yard was that I had hundreds of skippers in my yard. And because skippers use it as a host plant, multiple species of skippers. So it is so important to add grasses to your yard, not just for texture and movement and color, but also to improve your soil and to help our wildlife. Oh, and they're deer resistant for the most part. So that's really excellent. So if you start off your beds with the grasses first and then go back in a season later after the grasses have established with your flowers and you're planting densely, it discourages deer from going in there and eating the yummy flowers. Okay, and I love this image and the one that's coming up next to it. A lot of our non-native species of plants don't have very deep root systems because they're not suited for our environmental conditions. Excuse me, but if you look at how far down big bluestem will put its roots, and that says 5 meters deep, but in feet, I think the longest root systems on big bluestem that they found are 12 to 15 feet deep. So I mean that's going down into the earth. It's breaking up soil, it's improving the soil. It is holding carbon in the soil itself. So even if you have wildfires or prescribed burns, the majority of the carbon is actually inside the soil and being locked there. It's not being released into the atmosphere. And here is the next slide showing some of our native plants and how far down those roots actually go. This is at the US Botanical Gardens, and this was The Secret Life of Roots. That was the presentation that they had. So switchgrass, one of the taller grasses that we have, one of my favorites throughout the seasons. It's giving you lots of color. With our native grasses, they are becoming more popular. For example, one of the big nurseries near me that supplies native plants as well as some of the traditional plants, they said that they're going to completely stop selling fountain grass. They're going to stop selling miscanthus, silvergrass, and they're going to focus on our native grasses. So with that focus comes nativars, because number one, nurseries have to sell grasses, and also number two, if we're not using those non-natives, as designers, we need more heights and shapes and sizes. So we will often go to nativars to fulfill certain shapes and sizes. I try to use as much straight species as I can, and that is especially important when I do work at restoration sites and in state and local parks. We always use straight species and local ecotypes as well. But switchgrass is great because it will tolerate upland and lowland conditions, dry all the way to wet. The only thing that most of our grasses won't do, because they're from the prairies, is they don't do a lot of shade. So these are for sun to partly sunny, but they really like being out in hot baking sun all day. My favorite grass, actually my kid's favorite grass. The two images on the far right and far left are from my own garden. The image in the middle is from a nursery. I forgot to take one to show that it actually does go through all the range of those colors. My toddler calls it rainbow grass because it has so many different colors in each season. So on the far left, you'll see green, but it's also got purple tinge coming through it. And then on the far right, right now, even at the very end of winter, we're about to go into spring, it still looks like that with that coppery color, and it's still standing upright. I believe this particular one that I have in my yard is the variety Standing Ovation. I try to use, when I do use nativars, to use, sorry, I'm glitching, to use naturally derived nativars, so variations of a plant that have been found in the wild that have not just been altered or genetically altered in a lab somewhere, or hybridized. So I believe Standing Ovation is one of them. The really cool thing about Little Bluestem, aside from the fact that it has all those great colors, and it's a size that's very usable. So in the spring and summer, it's, you know, between 1 to 2.5 feet tall, and then by the fall and winter, it's 3 feet tall. So you can use it in the front and the middle of borders and in smaller size beds. The other really cool thing about it is you get the skippers, but you also get dragonflies because they like to perch on them and hunt. And you also have bumblebees, queens, that like to nest at the very bottom of these. So I try not to disturb my little bluestem for as long as I possibly can. I'll let it remain upright until I start seeing green come up through it, because all those queens are setting up their homes and nesting. Our native grasses also provide really high quality, in prairies, they provide high quality nutrition to all grazing animals, and in the fall and winter, their seed heads are eaten by songbirds and migrating birds. Here are some more grasses that are native to us. Top left is Indian grass, or Sorghastrum nutans. That one does get pretty big, but it is so gorgeous, and when the sun hits it in the afternoon, it just glows gold. Middle in the top is Prairie Dropseed. That's another one that's usually pretty readily available, and it's a manageable size, 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. It does take a little bit to get established, but it's a gorgeous grass. Top left is Side Oats Grama, I believe. Bottom left is Tufted Hairgrass. Middle bottom is Big Bluestem in the fall. Now, Big Bluestem does tend to spread and it gets big. So if you have a large area that you need to cover, definitely go with this one. But if you're working in a small space in a yard, stay away from Big Bluestem and go with Little Bluestem. And on the bottom right is a grass that I personally haven't tried out yet. It's vanilla sweetgrass. It's another one that needs a lot of space to spread out, but it is gorgeous, and it does have a sweet vanilla scent. Okay, so we're going to go into some of our native forbs, our native perennials. So these guys are some of the smallest ones that I like to use towards the fronts of borders. Again, it's really important that we layer our beds and make sure that we have something appropriately sized for each area of the bed. I struggle a lot with putting plants in the very, very front and making sure I fill it in, because you need a lot of them because they're very small. Some of them take, a long time to spread, even if they do spread. So I always tend to underplant in the front in my own garden, because pocketbook. In clients' yards, then I have kind of free reign. So top left is hairy beard tongue, which is loved by so many pollinators, especially our large native bees, like our bumblebees and carpenter bees. Top right is golden Alexander, and I love golden Alexander. I know some people are not about it because it can get a little bit enthusiastic or aggressive in the garden, but I find that it's really easy to relocate if it goes somewhere you don't want it to, but it's almost evergreen. I think last year I had it stay evergreen in the yard. This year it died down for about 3 weeks, and it's sprouting back up now very quickly on my side yard. And for a few weeks in spring, you're just going to get a carpet of beautiful yellow flowers from it. Bottom left is Heath Aster, and one of the ones that's really popular right now that you can find in nurseries is Snow Flurry. It is maybe about 3 to 6 inches tall. It's really low to the ground, great for rock gardens. Threadleaf Coreopsis and its cousin Rose Coreopsis, really great for front of the border. And I've never had deer browse Threadleaf Coreopsis, the yellow one. And then moss phlox. I struggle a little bit with moss phlox just because deer like to nibble on it, and it tends to die out in the center. But some people have like the absolute right conditions for it, and they have these gorgeous cascades of moss phlox or carpets of moss phlox. So I'm jealous of them all. Okay, so some lower front of the border to middle of the border plants, and you don't have to go super, super low in the front. You can use plants that are 2 to 3 feet tall in the front of the border. So these are some more examples. I have aromatic aster, rudbeckia, orange cornflower specifically, and golden Alexander in the very fronts of my own beds. The golden Alexander is constantly covered with swallowtail butterfly caterpillars throughout the entire growing season. And even though the deer browse on it a little bit, it bounces back very quickly. Bottom row, we've got blue mist flower, white yarrow, and spotted bee balm. I have to mention with the guys on the bottom row there, they are more enthusiastic. So when you are planning your beds, make sure that you're matching up the plant enthusiasms. So some people, it's a new term called sociability ranking of plants. How well do they get along with each other? So try to match that up. So right now I have a bed in the very, very front of my house that I don't go out to. I don't water it. I don't do anything to it. It has spotted bee balm and yarrow that are just duking it out over there, and I just let them. I don't move them. I don't baby them. They both like hot, dry, and to be left alone, and they reseed in that bed, and they don't bother anything else. I would not put those two guys in a bed with, for example, my golden Alexander, because they would take that over. My blue mist flower currently is all by itself in a bed because it has overtaken almost everything that I've put next to it. I'm going to keep trying to see if there's something that I can put next to it that it won't eat and cover. But so far, I personally haven't had luck, but it's really great to be in the side of the house where I don't even have to worry about it. It just reseeds itself and keeps spreading. And it's a contained little what is it, like 5 foot by 10 foot bed, and it's just a sea of blue, and it looks great. I may try whitewood aster next to it, as has been suggested to me, but I will let y'all know how that goes when I try it out later this year. Okay, so some middle of the bed plants, and again, various levels of enthusiasm. I really, really love white turtle head over there in the top left. It still has golden seed heads and stems that are standing in my yard because I haven't cut anything back yet. But it is constantly covered with bumblebees. And the cool thing about it is the flowers are closed and the bumblebees are specialists, pollinators for it, that have to push the flower open and get inside. And then their little butts hang at the bottom of the flower. And so you'll just see them, collecting nectar and pollen with their little fuzzy butts hanging out, and just go up and try to hold yourself back and not pet their little fuzzy bums. Um, it is also a host plant for the Baltimore checker spot butterfly. So it's just a great plant. I have it in full baking sun on a south facing wall against brick. So I know it can go to part shade and some moister conditions, but I have it in some really inhospitable conditions, and it's doing great. Another plant that I absolutely love that I try to use as much as I can is blue false indigo. It is just so gorgeous. I can't stop looking at this plant. Every time I walk outside, I'm looking at its leaves, I'm looking at the flowers. It also has really cool closed flowers, and the bumblebees will either go, I forget which bees go inside and which bees cut little holes on the side of the flowers and go in to get the pollen. But the pollen inside is orange. So when you see the bees come out, they'll have bright orange pollen on their pockets. And sorry, I am trying to pay attention to time. With obedient plant, it is a more aggressive plant. I love using it because deer don't like it and it's just really pretty. But it can be a little bit more enthusiastic. So there are nativars of it that are less enthusiastic. Wild bergamot, sweet goldenrod, some of the other ones. And then we got some of our tall plants. We got swamp milkweed, we've got foxglove beard tongue, tall thoroughwort, which a lot of people don't use, but I really like it because of the texture that it provides. All the various liatris and tall garden phlox, which you'll see swallowtails on all the time. So we put it all together. Really tall stuff in the back, medium stuff in the middle, a little bit shorter, and then very, very short. Now, you don't have to do the full range of all of this because this particular bed is, I think, 10 by 10, maybe a little bit deeper. So you could just choose, this section or just the very front section or a section in the middle. But just make sure that whatever you do, that you have appropriate sizing. Gardening in the shade. Again, textures are just as important as flowers. Thin leaves, fat leaves, narrow leaves, spiky leaves. This was my truck bed full of natives and nativars for a client's backyard or front yard that was completely shaded. And it was just super duper colorful. And she was so surprised that she could get so much color just from leaves, so much color and texture. And again, here's some color and texture. Please excuse some of the things in here that are not native. This is in my own garden, but fuzzy things, tall, spiky things, broad leaves. This is in the winter. This was in the late springtime. Again, various textures to choose from. Designing gardens in the shade can be a little bit more difficult, but it's not impossible. You just have to make sure that you're meeting the site conditions. Whether you have wet shade, dry shade, average shade, and also, is there a walnut tree nearby? I had a client pretty recently where they couldn't grow anything in one part of their garden. As soon as I walked out there, I was like, you have a black walnut tree. That's why you can't grow it. It's not your fault. Designers, we love sedges. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes. Most of them are 2 feet and below. Most of them can do wet to dry, sun to shade. Even though you won't see them labeled as sun tolerant, they can handle, most of them can handle quite a bit of sun. There's over 2,000 different species of sedges across the globe, and 500 of them are native to North America. And the other cool thing is they're usually semi-evergreen to evergreen. You don't really have to shear them or do anything to them, but maybe once every 3 to 5 years. So really low maintenance, and you can use them as lawn alternatives as well. So I struggle a lot with dry shade. It is difficult. I have to finagle plants to grow in there. Right now, in my own garden, I have Pennsylvania sedge, bluewood aster, golden ragwort, obedient plant, late boneset, and wild red columbine growing under my pin oaks. It took a while to figure out what they wanted, but I got it going. I would suggest before going out and buying a whole bunch of a plant to try under in a difficult spot, to just try 1 or 2 and see how it does, and then let the site tell you what it needs. Some other suggestions of plants that you can try in dry shade. Here's a combination of them. Obviously, all of these things will not be in bloom or in berry at the same time, but just as a demonstration. And sorry if I'm going faster, I just recognized what time it is. If you have the ideal shade conditions, you can get so many spring ephemerals and beautiful, gorgeous, dreamy things in there. So if it's like average dappled shade, average moisture, you know, you can have your wild bleeding hearts and your woodland phlox and your Virginia bluebells and your May apples. So those are the Goldilocks conditions. And then wet shade, this was just a combination that I quickly put together for a rain garden for the shade. And that one's a little bit easier to do because, you know, cardinal flower, white turtlehead, gray sedge, blue flag iris, grape blue lobelia, they all do well there. And if you guys ever want lists of dry shade, wet shade, full sun with moisture, I have documents on my Facebook group, but also you can go to University of Maryland Extension, and they have lists as well, which are very helpful. Almost getting to the end. So don't forget to have fun in your garden and dress it up. Seating spaces, adding boulders, adding logs, adding rocks that your kids painted at school, statues, whatever that you want to use to dress up and add a little bit of interest to your garden is fantastic. And don't let anybody tell you like, oh, you're not supposed to have a gazing ball, that's tacky, or why do you have those bottles there? Is whatever brings pleasure to your eyes. So have fun with it, be quirky. This is a pet peeve of mine, so I threw it in there. This is one of the biggest finishing touches that folks struggle with. Very often when people have issues with their beds not looking tidy, it's because they don't have a defined edge at the end of their bed that says where the bed is. So I like to use a trenched edge because edging materials are annoying. They have to be readjusted every few years, and you still kind of have to trench and weed whack around them. So I just like to just stick with the trenched edge. I just go in there with a trencher, clean it up, or create it to begin with, and then once a year I'll retrench it a little bit and make it look nice and sharp. That way, if you have your husband is cutting the lawn, or a lawn service is cutting the lawn, or your kids are doing the lawn, and you have, you know, your native plants coming up in a bed, and they don't know what those plants look like before they're in flower, you at least have a defined edge that says, hey, here's the bed, please don't mow into that. And you're saving your plants. So make sure that you have an edge to your beds. On nativars, and I kind of touched base about this. Again, whenever possible, please use the straight species. However, a lot of our straight species, like for example, for our 9-bark, can get quite tall or wide. So in those circumstances, if you have an HOA or if you're just really limited on space, you can go to a nativar. Also, sometimes nativars are all that's available native-wise in nurseries that are near wherever you live. We are lucky in the DC metro area that we have more options than most, but if you go to other areas in Maryland, they might not have the same access that we do. Almost done. So low scape mount chokeberry. I love chokeberry. I like it big. I like it little. I like it medium. Super cute. The other one, oh God, summer sweet. The hummingbird variety, it's smaller. It can handle medium to wet sites, so it's really great for rain gardens. Hummingbirds love it. So that's another one that I like. It has good fall color. In my garden, the top most visited milkweed happens to be the ice ballet variety of milkweed. I had over 50 cats each round of egg laying from the butterflies on that particular one. Why? I don't know. I have 4 other kinds of milkweed in my yard, but that's the one that they love the most. White obedient plant, Crystal Peak. You get to have obedient plant in your yard, but it doesn't take everything else over. So that's fantastic. And again, a lot of our grasses, you won't see the straight species. So little bluestem, standing ovation, Shenandoah switchgrass, that is a wild variation that was found, I believe. So that you'll see a lot. And again, with plant ranges, ranges are important. It's important to pay attention, especially if you're going for a ecoregion specific garden, to pay attention to each plant's range. It can be a little difficult because nurseries will sell plants that are slightly outside of our range, either to the south or to the north. And so you might not even think about it when you go to pick something out. The other thing is we don't have, everybody hasn't agreed what resource online they want to use for plant ranges, just because there's so many of them and it's so difficult to do the research behind it. So for example, Eastern Blue Star, it's a contentious one. So Bon will show that it has range in Maryland, but then others will show that it does not. So why do we use Amsonia in the garden? It's because it has flowers in the spring. It has really interesting texture, both varieties of textures of leaves. It has great fall color, and it is deer proof. Deer don't touch it. The other thing is it's good for erosion control. So a lot of times when you see native plantings, especially outside of like malls or shopping centers or whatever, you'll see a lot of Blue Star, and that's why. Almost done. Fothergilla, and this is Legend of the Fall. So it's both a nativar and slightly outside of our range, but it's really pretty and it's deer resistant, almost deer proof. You'll see that a lot. Especially as native plants are becoming more popular, you'll see a lot more of Fothergilla in the gardens. So that is it for my presentation. And I will turn it over back to our hosts. And if you guys have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, we do. The chat's been going.
Sorry, I haven't been looking at the chat.
Yeah. It's not up to you to watch the chat. People have been answering questions for each other in here, though.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice. But we do have a few, so I will start with the first one here. Do you have a recommendation for software that's good for the average homeowner?
So unfortunately, there is not a software that's good for anybody out yet. Maybe I'll get on that because I'm working with a professor who works with AI, and maybe we could develop a software, because even as a designer, there isn't a really great software for me to use. So when you see my renders, they are me going in and individually cutting out the shapes of each plant, editing it, and then saving it for use later so that I can drop it on top of images for my clients to use. And I've tried other software before where they're like, oh, well, we have, 200 varieties of plants native to Texas or wherever, but then they don't have it for the state of Maryland. So, and the software is really expensive. So hopefully we can come up with an app, put maybe 200-300 of the most commonly used plants in there so that you can just drag and drop it into a picture of your front yard and just kind of get an idea of what it would look like. I'm sorry, I don't have a better option.
Okay, if it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. All right, do you consider hardscaping before you start designing?
Yes and no. So I am not a landscape architect, so I don't have licensure to do any kind of hardscaping. I can make recommendations on where I think a patio should go, or where a pergola should go, or where drainage needs to be adjusted. But I try to go with the hardscaping that's present, and that's usually because of budgeting restrictions because, you know, if you're going to put in a patio, that's $20,000 of your budget gone. So I consider where everything hardscape that exists currently is, or where they want to put something, and then I'll plant around it. Yes. Does that answer?
Yes, that does. Yes, I'm trying to scroll through this chat. Okay, so there were some questions about lists of native plants, but also specifically about ones that would be more aggressive, less aggressive, you know, how you can find.
So I personally have put on my Facebook group lists of these plants because I was having a really hard time finding all of the available plants from just one resource. So I've made one so far for full sun perennials, grasses, full sun forbs. I haven't done shade yet, but if you go to Perfectly Imperfect Gardens and you join the group, and this is not a sell for my group, um, that resource is there. I have it both in posts and also as documents that can be shared. But you know, going to your university extensions, that's going to be your #1 resource, and then calling the university extension, your county extension program, and chatting with a master gardener or master naturalist. Yes, and there's MAGIC is one of the good groups to go to. But again, it's not all concise in one spot, so I'm working on it.
Yes, and this is kind of related, kind of mostly covered, but also a list of plants that are mutually beneficial together.
So that one's going to be harder to create, just because of there's so many plants, and then there's different categories of plants that are mutually beneficial together. So for one example, if you have heavy clay soil, I've suggested, you know, go in and plant little bluestem in there first, give it a year and let it break up the soil. Then go in there with your native forbs that may not have done well in that clay soil to begin with. So those are, unfortunately, a lot of this is you doing some research on your own, looking some of these things up, and then trial and erroring in your own gardens. And that's why my garden at my house right now is about 2.5 years old, but I consider it a test garden because I'm still figuring my own yard out. And my garden versus my next door neighbor's garden, completely different microclimates and environmental conditions just from one garden to the next. So pay attention to your plants, listen to them, listen to what they're telling you. Some plants that might be aggressive, for example, the spotted bee balm that I have in my front garden, that's super hot and dry and it's doing really well there. I also have it in a side garden where it's more shady and it's not spreading there. So it's aggressive in one spot, but not in the other spot. And I can plant less aggressive things next to it. So it's also site dependent, not just plant dependent. Sorry, none of this is straightforward.
That's why the questions come up in the chat. This is not an easy answer. Do you have suggestions for grasses that can handle shade?
Yes. Let me pull it up because I don't have everything memorized.
We had a couple of suggestions in the chat. We had bottlebrush grass.
Yes.
Theo
Yes.
listed.
We don't have a ton. There's northern sea oats, which is more aggressive in the shade, but it'll grow in the shade. A lot of times in the shade, instead of grasses, I'll go to sedges because we have sedges from 4 feet all the way down to 1 foot, with various different textures, and there's semi-evergreen to evergreen. So I feel like they provide even more than grasses, and you don't have to go back and cut them every single year and take out the extra foliage, the dead foliage. So if you're struggling to find grasses for shade, go to the next best thing and go to sedges. They're just truly lovely. And there's clump forming ones as well as rhizomatous ones that will spread if you need to cover larger spaces.
Okay, and I think I might be to the last one, but somebody would like to know about dogs and dog pee and plants that can handle dogs.
Okay. It really depends on, do you have a female dog? Do you have a male dog? How big is your dog? I haven't gotten the dog pee question before. Um, I usually say I have gotten the dog pee question with relations to something else. So the best thing you can do for your dog is to give him something to pee on. So if you give him like a couple of boulders to pee on, like they like to pee on fire hydrants, they really like boulders and like structures. So if you give them those to pee on instead of your plants, then I think that's a slightly better option. But dogs are dogs, and especially if you have big dogs and they're tearing through, garden beds in your backyard and peeing everywhere, they're gonna do what they're gonna do. Fence off your plants? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that question, dogs, plants
Because it's ammonia, there's very few plants that are going to be able to handle. Actually, I don't know any plants that can handle daily ammonia getting saturated and then not dying. Though I will say I do have a boulder with it'll come to me. I'll get back to you.
That's
One
okay.
sec.
Okay, well, that was the last question. So I don't know, Amanda, you have anything you want to finish off with?
Yes, I just, oh, Anna, did you
Oh,
have?
I just remembered. Yes, it's blue-eyed grass. I have blue-eyed grass
Mhm.
next to a boulder that our neighbor's Wiesla pees on almost daily, and it has made it. It has not died yet.
Okay.
So
Yay.
you've
Okay.
got one. Sorry.
Excellent. I think everyone really enjoyed your presentation.
Oh,
Thank you so
really? Thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
I hope I did
Yeah.
okay. It's this is
We're
new.
looking forward to part two. Um, I wanted to thank everyone who's here for coming, and I hope that you were able to get some inspiration. I know I did from Anna's talk. And to also, if you have, I know everyone's schedules are so busy, but if you have any time at all to volunteer with our Wild Ones group, you just need to be a member. We do need some help with social media and also with adding external events to our calendar. We would so appreciate an extra pair of hands for some of these things. So don't hesitate to get involved if you have any interest in that. And encourage you to give away any extra native plants you have to a neighbor or a friend. Get them started. All you need is one to get someone started. And keep checking back on our calendar. And do if you have suggestions or things you'd like to see us offer, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. And thank you
Thank you,
again.
everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.